Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Help Systems helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements to the next level by pairing with Cobalt Strike, a threat emulation tool ideal for adversary simulations and red team operations. Learn more at securityweekly.com/coresecurity. Imagine this scenario. You're out of the office unexpectedly, and a colleague pings you because they need access to some system you have credentials for. Now, my listeners would never send passwords over email or Slack. But what about your coworkers? How many organizations out there are sending logins back and forth in plain text? Worse yet, how many just store all of their logins on a shared spreadsheet? Keeper Security's password management platform locks down logins, payment cards, and more in a patented zero-knowledge encrypted vault. Sign up for a Keeper free trial today. Visit securityweekly.com/Keeper. CyberGRX brings a revolutionary approach to third-party cyber risk management. Using sophisticated data analytics, real-world attack scenarios, and real-time threat intelligence, CyberGRX provides a complete portfolio analysis of a company's third-party ecosystem, helping the world's leading businesses prioritize their risks and make smart decisions. Interested in learning more? Head over to securityweekly.com/CyberGRX and demo the world's biggest third-party exchange.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us on April 14th to learn how to monitor your Wi-Fi network for attacks with Nzyme, a free and open source wireless intrusion detection system. Live attendees will have the chance to win a $100 Hacker Warehouse gift card. Register at securityweekly.com/webcasts. And don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, now for the Enterprise Security Weekly News. Check out securityweekly.com/ESW 265 if you want to take a look at our stories for today. Probably won't get to all of them. There's quite a few. We've got 22 stories today. And as usual, I have ordered these in terms of largest deals to smallest deals, starting with funding. We got just a bunch of acquisitions today. Any favorites in here? Any place you guys want to start, or I'll just start at the top and go?
I mean, Attivo is kind of an interesting one for a astronomical number.
Oh, you think that's astronomical?
Obviously, I've not read the rest of them.
We get some crazy stuff. So I mean, it's been something we've been talking about for a while because there are over 50 security unicorns now. Maybe, with this Veracode acquisition here, I think that makes it at least 51. So over 50 that are worth $1 billion or more. So this isn't even hitting that billion dollar mark. So there's at least 50 companies larger.
Was Veracode a unicorn before this, though?
I don't know. No. So, I mean, they were actually, so generally, unless you're doing some kind of fundraising, you don't really get a valuation, is my understanding of it. Tyler Shields would be the expert here. He could correct me.
Sure, but they've been bought and sold a few times. So I haven't followed it that closely. So.
And the last time they got bought was by Thoma Bravo. CA spun them out when CA was acquired by Broadcom. Basically, Broadcom wanted CA, but wanted to spin out Veracode. And Thoma Bravo bought them for $950 million in cash. And that was back in 2018, I think. So I think you can easily say that shortly after that, they probably became a unicorn. But there just wasn't any formal valuation until now.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, so compared to the exits that we should be seeing in the future, the Attivo networks for $616 million should be relatively small, if we're going to go off valuations. But, some folks, I mean, it's going to be impossible for them all to have multi-billion-dollar exits, right? Or IPO. So we'll see what happens there. But absolutely, this is a huge one. Attivo has like 7 products. Most of them very detection focused, very lateral movement detection. They're known for, using deception for detecting lateral movement after an attacker gets inside. And they kind of pivoted to some AD products, which led to people throwing the term identity around. But it's really, from what I can tell, they're still doing the same thing. They're using AD to catch lateral movement, but it's still the same core goal, from what I can tell with these products. They raised $60 million, so 10x return doesn't sound shabby to me. $616 million acquisition on $60 million raised doesn't sound like a bad day.
Making moves over the last few years to expand outside of their core capabilities into adjacent areas. And so this makes a lot of sense. With the extra money behind it, I'm sure we will be seeing big things from them in the near future.
Yeah, SentinelOne, started with EDR and next-gen AV and kind of moved into XDR. And XDR is all about catching attackers more easily. So totally makes sense. Goes right to the core of what they do.
Yeah,
in my opinion. Tyler, you were saying something?
No, I think that's accurate. I'm just surprised. I feel like we're kind of in a huge bloat of how valuation is happening for all these tech companies. They're all great products, but we really haven't seen as much innovation as I would hope for the kind of dollar amounts being thrown around. But that's just me.
For sure. I definitely agree with that. And if you look at some of the companies on this list, again, these all might be fantastic technologies, but are we seeing anything wildly out of the box here? Unless I'm missing something from their press releases and their websites, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. We're not seeing anything crazy. Yeah, it totally makes sense. And Tyler, that's a conversation we literally have every news segment. Is like, how do all these numbers make sense? There's no way all these numbers make sense. It's literally, we have that conversation every week.
But what I find is my acceptance or tolerance for what's going on in the industry is so distorted now by all of this news and all of this money that's floating around that like $1 billion company doesn't even sound that big. And obviously it is. Most companies never, ever reach that threshold. But because there's so much bloat, as Tyler just said, it's almost like, oh, it's just another $1 billion company. But that's a big deal. It really is a big deal. But is it real in cybersecurity? Is what we're seeing real? Or are we just getting accustomed to, this incredible inflation?
And that end over end needing to get a higher valuation in order to pay back the last round, in order to get to that next funding seed, all of those like continual processes tend to lend themselves to companies that don't evolve. They're searching for that dollar. They're looking for the next acquisition to push them over the next edge, whether it makes sense or not. And so I think it is counterintuitive overall for how this funding and seeding is going on, and it's not great for innovation and the industry as a whole. Well, some of it makes sense, and there's a few that are interesting acquisitions. Keep acquiring new companies and or getting a higher valuation to pay back the last round. It's paying Peter or robbing from Peter to pay Paul. Like, it just doesn't make a lot of sense long term.
And I don't think we're seeing it on this list necessarily, but there certainly are companies that don't come from the traditional cybersecurity or even core IT security space that have been making plays over the last couple of years to acquire security tech because it's hot. And so you see almost like this hodgepodge of technologies being shoved together so that these companies can say, hey, we play in cybersecurity and here's our platform. I put that in air quotes. And some of it integrates well. Some of the players play nicely in the sandbox together, but in some cases, there's certainly some companies that have been on, acquiring sprees where it feels like they're just picking off anything they can because they have the money to do so. And that also hurts the industry as well, because, there are a lot of, especially end users in the space, who are looking for real solutions. And, as our last guest just said, it's not all about the technology, it's people in process too. But if the technology doesn't make sense, the people and the processes are sort of at a loss. And so when we have this mishmashing of tools together, that doesn't help anybody streamline their security program, optimize it, and be able to use the tools in a way that makes sense to actually mitigate the real risk.
Yeah, but that's not their problem, right? They're there to make money, like not worry about it.
I know.
And that's why we see, the breaches and the, the investment in security follow the same up and to the right path. But it's, I mean, well, we had a great conversation, with Pablo from CoreSecurity about exactly that, about how, okay, the products are here, the capabilities are here. Tyler's saying that these tools are catching them, but yeah, we're still missing that glue, which is people and processes, to where we can use those products effectively, and some of it is going to be on the products to where, like a bunch of people were saying, oh, we caught SolarWinds, but it doesn't matter if nobody saw it. I mean, sure, anybody could log 100% of what's happening on a box and say, oh, we caught it, but if a human didn't see it, that's kind of like if a tree falls in a forest question, right?
Yep, that is a problem, especially from an operations standpoint. Like, you have a lot of expensive equipment. You've put a lot of capital budget into all of the blinky boxes, and yet, unless it has some really good automation and quarantine, which no one's doing because that breaks things and causes issues for false positives, investment, and you've basically wasted that CapEx for those tools and products. You would have been better off to invest that into more resources to do it manually before you went to something that did that automated.
And so what you want to do is buy some cyber insurance, right? So moving to story number one.
Good segue there, Adrian.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. That's exactly what we've seen people doing too. It's like, okay, like while we're figuring out how to stop attackers and stuff, in the meantime, we could probably use an insurance policy here to bridge that skills gap. But so Cowbell Cyber, which there's got to be a story behind that name. I don't know what the story is, but maybe we'll have somebody from Cowbell on at some point. They can tell it to us. Raised $100 million in Series B funding, which is even at current inflationary funding rounds, like that's still pretty big. But given what they're doing, like I guess it makes sense. And they're one of these. More and more, we're seeing cyber insurance brokers and providers getting very like micromanaging their policyholders to the point to where, if a policyholder opens a port to the public internet, they get questioned about it. Like, why was this opened? Is this necessary to have open? Did you know this got opened? And some of them have their own stack. They have their own tech stack. And I think Cowbell. So some of them have acquired their own stuff. Like I'm trying to remember the name of the example here. I can look it up real quick. But Coalition. I think it's Coalition Cyber that actually has some of their own IP. They've done some acquisitions. And then some of them white label, and they'll bring in CrowdStrike and stuff like that. But the interesting thing here is, like, along with your policy, it's also kind of, now that we gave you a policy for X amount, you're going to have to, do this list of stuff. You're going to have to deploy these products. We need access to some of the monitoring here. So that's kind of their tagline is continuous monitoring. They call it continuous cyber insurance, which doesn't make any sense. Like, it makes it sound like other insurance only works on Fridays or something like that. Of course, it's continuous. But I think what they're going after is that they're doing some continuous monitoring there as well.
It's like
it is a different approach
for cybersecurity.
No, I mean, you're right.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's exactly it, the ankle bracelet for cybersecurity, which is a different approach for cyber insurance, because a lot of them have went to doing hands-on evaluation, not necessarily pen tests, but they've got questionnaires. They're now looking at environments prior to just taking your word for it, or taking a certification of some kind outside of compliance, which is great. Just how in-depth that gets and what they're looking at is really where some of these insurance companies are starting to get super deep into and doing a good job for the ones that are doing a good job, where others are falling behind. Well, I think the continuous monitoring, if they team up with places that are utilizing tools and MSPs and monitoring that actually matters and detects stuff, I think that's a proactive approach to doing this, and it provides a lot of value for the really small to medium business that may not have that monitoring otherwise. So it is kind of a novel approach from a cyber insurance standpoint. But again, this is the first year that they've ever lost money. And a lot of that is due to the ransomware and due to a lot of the stuff that they've had to pay out because their policies were much more open-ended. Lots of places aren't going to get cyber insurance now that we've seen coverage drop all over the place. And your ability to do procurement relies on your ability to have cyber insurance. So there's a lot of businesses that are going to be in a hard spot unless they figure this security stuff out.
And that's a really good point, but it's almost a double-edged sword, because what you're saying is, obviously true. It is going to be great for small and medium-sized businesses, but at the same time, some of these small and medium-sized businesses aren't going to have the resources to be able to remediate some of the issues that are going to be found as a result of this. Whereas a larger organization that has more of this continuous monitoring mindset, they're well equipped or better equipped than these small and medium-sized businesses. So what might end up happening is you're going to find these smaller companies who are doing this in good faith and end up with problems that they can't solve, or at least can't solve imminently.
Yeah. And what's interesting that Cowbell is doing is they basically getting some telemetry from your products and then calculating a real-time risk score, which we've seen some other companies do before, though it does outside in and an inside out approach, which is less common with like the BitSights and security scorecards and UpGuards and those folks. Those tend to be outside in, and based on that, so very analogous to the, get a lower auto insurance rate if you put the ODB2 sensor in your car and let them, track how you drive, and similar for healthcare, get a lower premium, if you give them some health data or something like that. So, I guess, go ahead.
There's several insurance companies that are doing this and actively developing this. And I would be wary of places I don't really know. And I'm not saying they're good or bad, but like what to look at and what actually matters from a security standpoint. Like if you're looking at your vulnerability scans, or you're looking at exploits, or how long it's been since you patched something, like, okay, that may be part of it, but really looking holistically at, what your Active Directory security policies look like, what's your Active Directory look like, what's your endpoint detection, how are you managing what your policies are, like those things, what's your multi-factor, what's your fingerprints on the outside, those things I think would manage to be much more impactful than, say, providing someone a NESA scan or Nmap output or whatever your carbon black configuration is. Like, yeah, some of that matters, but that's a very small insight into the overall security and likelihood of risk and a breach.
One thing's for sure, cyber insurance is from now on, if you want a policy at least, entangled, with both products and security teams. So it's we're going to continue to see that evolve over time, and I think this is one of the more interesting trends here. Certainly, yeah, we see the questionnaire went from 1 page to 15 pages or something like that. But also, it's just insane to me that insurance companies are calling up companies and saying, "Hey, why did you open this port?" So it's definitely a new age. So let's see here. We have a few interesting new companies come out of stealth. Hackuity is apparently another vulnerability prioritization platform. So it's kind of late to market. So I'm interested to see what they're going to be doing. That's it looks like the same market that coresecurity and RiskSense and some of those were in, but maybe they're doing something. It's always interesting seeing products come in late to market because they get to learn from the mistakes that the early folks made, and sometimes those are much better products. Like take the iPhone, for example. There were a bunch of smartphones on the market when the iPhone came out, and they're all just awful to use by comparison. So that was a no-brainer. But we'll see if they're able to do that. So it's definitely going to be one that I'm going to be watching. And these seed rounds are basically like Series A used to be 5 years ago. So this is, I think, a 13 million seed round. So pretty good size. The other one, OneLayer, that came out of stealth, is building security for private 5G networks. And this is something that I don't really understand much about, but I've seen a couple companies here that are, apparently something about 5G makes it, I assume it's all software defined, so you can kind of slice and dice and do MPLS type things with 5G networks, I guess. I don't know if you know any more about this, Tyler.
Not as familiar with but yeah, there's going to be some interesting, I think, some SD-WAN innovation, some MPLS and 5G integrations. That now they've got the network stood up, they've got some of the protocol moved over to some of the newer equipment. I think we'll see a bunch of kind of newer innovation and offerings from both cellular providers as well as software that's going to ride on top of those protocols and interfaces.
Mm-hmm. Any that you find interesting here, the fundraising, Katie, that you want to talk about?
Oh, well, I thought Hackuity was interesting because, it is a late entrant. And especially, we've seen some big acquisitions in that space, validating the market. So I'm curious to see where they go. And it's almost like an input to cyber asset management too. So for me in particular, that's really interesting. I think, the more interesting thing that was in the acquisition space, the booze acquisition, and then the Acquizi Oops. Is that what you wrote? Yes, Acquizi Oops.
It was. And it sounds like you're talking about a trip to the liquor store and you say the booze acquisition.
The booze acquisition. Yes, I'm sorry. Well, it is St. Patrick's Day.
It is. Well played. So we've seen a lot. I mean, that's a trend that's been going on for a couple of years now. Our MSSPs, MDR firms getting gobbled up by, some of the big accounting firms and big security firms. So, that's often I don't even include those because they're so common. We actually, CRA acquired a company that focuses just on that stuff. So that a lot of these links will go to MSSP alert. I think it's .com, which is one of the places you can check that out. One of them goes to channel e2e.com, which I think is the same company. And they cover a lot of that stuff. And I think we're already at like the 274th acquisition this year when you include all that stuff. And we're barely in Q2.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think the thing about Booz Allen, okay, just to be clear, Booz Allen is just that it's focused on the national security space, and that's a space we're all sort of nervously watching a little bit right now for obvious reasons. So to me that was an interesting read on the link you have there in the show notes.
There's a good quote here. They describe Booz Allen as scouring the market for IT consulting and cybersecurity acquisitions. The company's war chest from 2021 through 2025 includes 3.5 to 4.5 billion in total capital deployment that prioritizes strategic acquisitions. That's a big budget to go spend on consulting firms.
They're doing a lot of interesting things, like between what they do for USG and some of their private projects and labs that they're developing. Like, their mission is highly critical, and they have a very large budget because of what they're supporting and the work they're doing with inside of the space. It's pretty cool.
All right. Jumping back to funding, two that I did want to mention is SafeBase raised an $18 million Series A. Very innovative company, I think, where they're kind of in that third-party risk management space. But their unique take on it is they give you a web page where you can basically publicly show, like if you've done a SOC 2, if you're ISO 27000 compliant. If you've had a recent pen test, like you can share all these details publicly on a page, and if this is one of your third parties, you can create an account and log in and see more details and download, maybe the executive summary of that pen test or the SOC 2 and take a look at it. But the idea here is it kind of greases the wheels for third party risk management, for the due diligence that companies have to do, which is often very onerous and big a lot of time spending. So putting all that in one place where somebody can access it, pretty cool. I think it's going to speed things up a lot, potentially. And then Rumble was the other one. Like, Rumble's already done amazing things. This is H.D. Moore's asset discovery product, and company product have the same name. But already they've done amazing things. They've kind of jumped leaps and bounds, I think, beyond certainly the vulnerability, the traditional Qualys Tenable. Of course, it's not a vulnerability management tool. But asset discovery is something you have to do well to be able to do the vulnerability, match up the vulnerabilities correctly. If you detect the wrong operating system, anything you do after that point is going to be wrong. If you get the device identification wrong. So really interesting. I imagine they can do a lot with $15 million Series A. I imagine a lot of it's just going to be capturing more of the market. They're probably already at that crossing the chasm point where, like, everybody who knows HD and knows, that Rumble is very interesting, is probably already familiar with it. And I imagine they're going to be capturing some larger swaths of the market now.
And what's really interesting about this is if you read the press release, you can see, they had a very nice funding round, but the number of investors is much, much larger than you normally see. And so that says to me that they're really using their networks, which is an important thing if you want to be successful in cybersecurity, both from a market penetration point of view as well as from a product development point of view. If you have all these inputs from the market, you're bound to, if you use them correctly, you're bound to build a better product.
So these don't always, these press releases don't always mention all the individual investors, but the reason I think they're doing it here is because there's a lot of signal from those names. Like, the founder and creator of Nmap is an investor. Chris Nickerson, for people who know Chris Nickerson, the founder of Demisto, co-founder of Duo Security, John Oberheide. Yeah, it says a lot that these particular people really believe in this product and are investing in it. So, yeah, I think it was in their best interest to specifically share all those names.
Yeah, it's kind of a big flaunt, but it's in a way that makes a lot of sense from a startup. Like, it signals a ton.
Yeah. All right, let's see. we mentioned Veracode. We talked about SentinelOne and Ativo. Another interesting one here is I think this is a private equity shop, Crosspoint Capital Partners. So STG, PE shop, had acquired RSA, McAfee, FireEye. Yeah, acquired a bunch of these huge, kind of legacy security vendors. And one of the things that they've been doing is kind of breaking them up and spinning them out. And like we saw, enterprise and consumer side of McAfee got broken up and spun out. FireEye got broken into the FireEye product side, with the old sandboxing technology, that kind of those products, and then Mandiant was split out, and now RSA Conference is being split off as an independent company from RSA proper. So I'm kind of interested to see if it ends up being becoming a big event company and doing acquisitions, or gets acquired into another big event company. Like Black Hat is part of, I forget the acronym, the name of the company. Yeah, UBM, which is a tiny part of a much larger company. Starts with an I. I forget the name of that company too. There's too many companies.
Yeah, I think
it's a British company, I think.
Yeah, I think that's an interest. It's not like a huge surprise, right? Because they have advertising, they've got webcasts, they've got the conference. I think they could potentially break out that into some CISO stuff, some Gartner stuff, potentially training. So there's a lot of moves that, because they've got a decent following and brand name for the executive level and the people that are making budgetary decisions, it allows them some purview to kind of expand out what they're looking for.
Yeah, to give you an idea, Informa was the name of the British company that acquired UBM for $5.2 billion. And I remember last time I did some analysis on this.
With $1 billion?
Yeah. Yeah. Black Hat was one of many conferences events that they had. But yeah, acquired, this is back in 2018, acquired UBM for 5.2 billion or 3.8 billion pounds sterling in cash. And they're just a tiny drop in the bucket for Informa. Let's see what Informa's revenue is. Okay, maybe more than a drop in a bucket, saying they're well, I got to turn that into US dollars. I don't understand. I can't do pounds in my head. Yeah, so their annual revenue is 2.2 billion. So pretty big company. And yeah, security is just a small drop in the bucket for them. So I think they could absolutely acquire RSA if they wanted to. So interested to see what happens here. RSA Conference has largely been independent as far as running it for a long time. So I don't think this was like a big deal to separate it out from the product side of RSA, but be interesting to see what happens. All right, let's see. So yeah, Katie, you noticed my oops. So the NortonLifeLock acquisition of Avast. So the UK has been big on this lately. They actually, I'm trying to remember the company. I want to say it was Giphy that Facebook acquired, that the UK said they would have to spin back out, that Facebook wasn't allowed to acquire Giphy. I want to say, I might be wrong in that, but I think it was Giphy. But UK has been pretty heavy on hitting big tech on acquisitions for basically antitrust type moves, type acquisitions, and so they're investigating NortonLifeLock for the Avast acquisition here. And to me, the irony is like NortonLifeLock was already split up. Like that's a consumer side of Symantec. Like it's already been broken up. and it's buying another kind of legacy antivirus product here, at least how I view it. So it's kind of ironic that they're gonna, say that this could make them have an unfair advantage somehow. I don't know. I kind of see all that stuff is in decline. Thoughts?
Yeah,
Nobody cares about NortonLifeLock.
NortonLifeLock wasn't cool back then. It's not really cool now.
Yeah.
I don't see, until we change our identity and identity, the way in which we operate as a country and as a whole, like, it is an insecure program. It's an insecure method, and it was not designed to be maintained as an identity. So it's not going to change until we change.
Mm-hmm. So story 15 is interesting. We've seen some NPM kerfuffles before. We've seen people pull their packages out of NPM and go home. We've seen malware introduced, people's accounts hacked, and malware introduced into like the install scripts for NPM libraries. But this one is kind of interesting because the developer, the maintainer behind Node IPC, which is part of Vue.js, decided to protest Russia's war through their package. So they're actually creating text files, putting it on people's desktops, which is kind of alarming, because that a lot of ransomware does that. So people's first impression when they see, an unknown text file, with a, I forget what the name of the text file is, but it was something equally alarming about the Russian war. Like they're going to rip their Ethernet cables out, shut down their PCs, and, restore from backup or something like that. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
I kind of agree. Like, I like to see companies taking a very strong-handed approach. I think it provides some reprieve from maybe the less hard-handed approach we're seeing in other places. So it's nice to see it. However, you think about what we're doing for sanctions, like, a lot of this does hurt the Russian people and not necessarily the people that matter. Some of it does. We're getting to the place where, maybe some of it will matter. But again, by doing some of these things and by doing it heavy-handedly, we're also affecting the political climate and the appetite towards the war in America from the Russian people. There's a counterintuitive side to this that psychology is going to play a role into, and we'll eventually start seeing that. So I think it's a double-edged sword there. And I don't know, the contractual obligation, I'm curious what that
Well, it's open source. That's the thing, is this is just an individual open source maintainer, and he maintains 40 other NPM packages. So this is just an individual. There's no company involved here, which I think is part of
provided free open license, like, do what you want, but I'm not maintaining anything past what I want to do. That's great.
Yeah, he actually, part of this is I think he changed his license from MIT to DBAD, which is don't be a douche.
Mm-hmm.
It's not douchebag, but try not to swear too much on this show. But yeah, so it's just one guy who's just like, hey, like, I'm going to take my massively popular independent NPM package and use it to make a statement. So yeah, no contract involved, no company involved, just a single person that just kind of goes off the edge a little bit. So how do you handle that as a company that's highly dependent on open source? How many huge billion-dollar unicorns are affected by this one guy wanting to make a statement about the war in Russia?
Then you have the caveat of, like, what happens if there's something like Log4j and, like, you're relying on that one library, and the library that you still have available in order for your product to work has a huge vulnerability in it. Like, now it's even,
you got to roll back to an old version, right? Like, that's all you can do.
And even if that old version is affected by something like Log4j or another vulnerability,
right?
Like, those
a vulnerability, yeah.
you've got a huge issue there of long-term product redevelopment on a very fast life cycle that leads to other vulnerabilities.
Rocking a hard place. Absolutely. Yeah, and he was putting vulnerabilities into this on purpose. At one point, he linked. There's this Colors LS library was intentionally vulnerable, like it was introduced as like a fake version of it that he attached to it, and he was rewriting files at one point, but only if he threw a geo IP library in there to detect if the person using the npm package had an IP that was located in Belarus or Russia. And so he was using that to actually damage files and things like that. So what a mess, and yeah, I'm not sure that there's an easy answer for this. Obviously, the versions where he did all this stuff got marked as deprecated, and like there's some things that you can do on the platform side. Like obviously you don't want to just automatically update to new major versions, because I think he did all this with major version changes, not like small iterative version changes. So, he wasn't trying to really hurt the people using the package. Like he was trying to direct it, somewhat trying to do it responsibly, but at the end of the day, like he's destroyed trust of him or any of the packages that he touches at this point. So a lot of people have some tough decisions to make, especially since this could happen tomorrow. Outside of NPM, some other open source or somebody else who manages 100 packages. So people have to figure out how they're going to handle this kind of situation when it happens. It's like monthly now that we see stuff like this going on.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for a little while, I think.
CISA added 15 vulnerabilities. We talked about this list that CISA came out with that was basically like, okay, here's the top 20 ways that you guys have been getting hacked based on our investigations, based on like FBI, government investigations and stuff like that. They added 15 to that list, and I literally did a spit take when I looked at the list because all but one are Microsoft. It's 14 Microsoft and one Sonic Wall, one buffer overflow vulnerability in a Sonic Wall device. So always good to have that.
Quite a few in there that you should be paying attention to. But again, a lot of this is done through automated patching. You should be doing this regularly. And if you look at the 500 or more that are now in that release, like it's pretty well spread apart over a good portion of the software. And they don't even have Oracle in there with their 700 every quarter.
Right. But I think it helps for prioritization, especially for people in enormous organizations that have huge list of vulnerabilities, and it kind of sends a signal that like, hey, if you're not patching these, like, we don't know what to tell you. Like the government told you to patch these, that should say something. Let's see. So this, I had a hard time getting too excited about this cyber incident reporting bill, because I think what we really need are details on how people get hacked so we can learn from those lessons. And this is mainly just a time-based thing, whereas within 72 hours of a breach, or 24 hours, if the organization made a ransomware payment, they got to let people know.
I get the idea of notification, but at the same time, every situation, every company is unique. And, not that I'm not saying don't ever pay or always pay. Obviously, there's no black and white here. This isn't a draconian decision. There are so many things to consider. And I think it's going to create a lot more questions than actually solving problems. This feels a little like a checkbox to me. We talked about this last week a bit, and I understand, the need to notify, obviously, but I'm not sure this is the right way to go about it, because I think there are going to be a lot of problems, especially when you have a smaller company, especially when you have a company who is in the critical infrastructure space. The parameters are different. If you're a retail organization, you're going to lose sales. You're going to maybe lose customer trust. But is that the same as if you're a utility company?
And maybe it's just a stepping stone bill. Maybe it's just, like they have to get this one done so that they can push a little bit further with the next one. Maybe it's something like that.
I hope that's the case, because I do think this is going to cause some big problems for certain companies.
Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned the scope. It's only for, companies categorized as critical infrastructure operators. So like if you take the case of Equifax waiting 41 days to let the public know about their breach, after 3 executives had sold their stock in the company, before the public was notified. This doesn't even affect that, because it's only critical.
Right. And in that case, so many people were affected. The breach was so egregious.
154 million Americans. Yeah.
I don't know.
Like we're all going to know if our lights go out because the company was ransomed. We're going to know that.
Right.
Again, I don't think we don't need oversight on one more thing from an organization that should be putting those resources into, providing better guidance, providing oversight and helping track some of that rather than, going witch hunting for things that they can make funding on and have all this overhead to do that. Like there's got to be better ways to handle that. And I like to see things where people aren't brushing it under the rug. I also don't agree that a government organization is probably the best place to monitor and oversee that, especially with something like FTC or something.
And I don't know. They're getting ambitious. The amount of people that they're, CISAs, and DHS in general that are trying to hire in cyber still don't exist. But it's they're getting pretty ambitious with stuff. So a lot of what they're doing is great. I love that there's 15 more vulnerabilities on that list, and it cracks me up that they're all Microsoft. But yeah, on the flip side, we got these kind of half measures that are, not really gonna make a dent.
Yeah.
So new company, Command Zero, led by Dov Yoran, brother of Amit Yoran, who is the CEO and chairman of Tenable Security, or Tenable Networks, Tenable Security. I forget the full name of the company. Not important. This is basically the team from ThreatGrid that was acquired by Cisco in 2014. Getting a team back together, though I don't think they ever broke up, because it looks like they all just left straight from Cisco to found this new company. So they were acquired as ThreatGrid by Cisco and pretty much left Cisco to start this new company. So I'm wondering if Cisco's maybe bankrolling their seed. Cisco has a ventures, investment side, that does make strategic investments. So kind of curious if that's what's going on here, that this is kind of like a spin out that Cisco wants an option on acquiring, 5-8 years down the road when they've grown to the right size. No idea what they're going to be doing yet. That part is still in stealth, but yeah, notable that this team is building something new. All right, I think we can jump into the squirrel stories. So the first one is this CISO. This guy just drops everything, has employees, and one of his employees, his family is stuck in Ukraine. He's like, I'm going to go get them. Crazy story. Like, I don't know if you guys have read the whole thing, but he traded his it must have been a nice watch. In Germany, he traded his wristwatch for a 15-year-old Toyota that was being held together with duct tape, to go drive into Ukraine towards the explosions to gather one of his employees. He's a CISO at Data Robot.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a local story for me, and it just really impressive. I think a lot of people are stepping up in ways they can, but this is obviously above and beyond, and just It's just amazing. This guy on his own dime flew over, traded his watch, and drove into a war zone to get an employee and his family. So, good on him. That's amazing.
And the picture of this guy is like, it's just a picture makes it all the more powerful. Like, it's an amazing story. Hopefully we'll get to see like the movie version of it at some point.
Well, he said they didn't talk the whole way back, so that part would be boring.
Yeah, no, you got to get creative with that. Yeah, I mean, they were that stressed, that nervous, that they didn't say a word until they crossed the border out of Ukraine. Yeah. So yeah, craziness. Always uplifting when you hear a story like that. Somebody willing to just drop everything and go help somebody out. Our other squirrel story is somebody discovered all these different emblems of various units of the U.S. Space Force. I got the impression Space Force, I don't know. I don't know much about Space Force. I didn't think it was very big, much less already having dozens and dozens of emblems. But some of them are very interesting, are very creative. I think my favorite is the six-headed Ghidra-looking monster, which we don't have up here. If you're watching the video version of this, Gus has put up some of them on the screen. But do you guys have favorites?
I like that one too. I like the one with the giant polar bear, the one that's bigger than the Earth. It's also slightly ironic given our environmental situation. And
the fact that the polar bear is ripping the Earth in two.
Well, maybe that's ironic. Its own, green statement right there.
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's
there's some funny ones too. Like not all of these are great.
Yeah, not all of them are like, some of them, I don't know what happened here, but some of them are very high quality. Graphic designer clearly made this. And then others are just like somebody in the lunchroom scribbled it on a napkin. Like, it's all over the place. I don't understand what the process of creating these emblems are, or what they're using them for. But yeah, it's worth checking out this thread and taking a look at some of these. Some of them are fun. Most of them have the Earth in the picture in some form, which is interesting given that it's all about space.
Yeah,
all right.
Not much to say.
And with that, thanks so much, Katie and Tyler, stepping in at the last minute to help us out. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Always fun.
Well, good to see you again.
And a big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will be back next week.